It's really interesting because I think it sounds like in both your organisations you went through a point where you realised that you had to take the issue by the scruff of the neck and do something about it. I think our own observations about the asset management industry is that we're certainly, for many firms, at the beginning of this. But yet most firms feel that they are really inclusive. They feel they're really diverse. They may have hired a head of D&I, they probably have some networks, they're probably members of the diversity project, yet we know that when speaking to the minorities in these firms, they still face significant challenges. So perhaps as a takeaway for us as an industry, from your experiences, how do we make that shift from policy to having the right policies in place which are really, really well-meaning to actually really changing the culture and people's lived experience? How do we do that?
I think, well, I mean, from my own perspective, for us, there was that sort of point where we'd had policies for years. And again, with agile working, so our version of that, we had loads of policies. It's just that people didn't feel able to do it because they thought they'd be judged in the wrong way. So again, I think you have to show. I mean, we're a business and we are, a successful business. And part of it for me was actually costing out what we were losing. And so because I work for a professional services firm. We have a lot of accountants, and everything is measured, and so I wanted to know from the people that we were losing for work-life balance and culture, what was the cost to us? And apart from any emotional cost or anything else, what was the cost to us as a business? And actually that was a real help for me, because that gave me a wonderful number of £68 million that I was then able to throw out during various discussions, because if you couldn't get the other arguments, there was a very clear business, rationale as to why we had to do something. And I think if your people are good enough to tell you about their experiences and open enough to do so, they're telling you for a reason. I think the only other point for me was it really was having a CEO that did get it, and that understood, and once his eyes were open, he wanted to do something about it. I think it is a benefit of having that talent role as well. I think is that it's you're there on the leadership team. You can and it gives you every opportunity to push out what you need to push out. So I see myself as having been very lucky to actually been in a position where I was next to my CEO saying that we need to do this, and that people listened. And frankly, we had that conversation where I did turn around and say, look, this is our choice. Inclusion has to underpin everything, and from all aspects of diversity. And if we don't do it, then I'm afraid I shouldn't be in this job. And actually I sort of never needed to get to that point, but I did put it out there on the table and say, I can tell you this is the issue we need to fix. So that was our point.
I think it's really interesting, because we had a big debate about whether dynamic working should be a policy, and in Barclays, dynamic working is not a policy. So for us, it isn't about being policy driven around that particular issue. It was driven by creating that inclusive culture. But I think there are just a couple of things that I think illustrate that, and that again shows it's not policy driven. And the first is role modeling. And that has to come from the top. So I couldn't agree with Emma more about getting a CEO buy-in and your senior leader buy-in. What we find is our very senior colleagues standing on platforms, sharing their stories, demonstrating how they do work dynamically, how they do fulfill inclusive recruitment practices in their shortlisting, creating ex officio positions, both for women, but increasingly for a fully diverse talent pool. I think that role modeling piece is paramount, and moves it away from the policy piece. And the final thing that I wanted to say was there is a bit about measurement and performance, and I'm not sure in my head whether this falls into policies or not, But at Barclays, we measure the what and the how. So everyone, every single person at their annual review time reports on both what they've done, financial reporting, reporting against objectives, but how they've done it against our values. And that, I think, really does continue to breed that sense of inclusivity.